Okay, we'll get started up and finish up the chapter 16 lecture / code along today. What we did yesterday, we're going to build on top of. So what we did yesterday is we took a kind of a completed walkthrough of chapter 13, which was a bookstore website. And so this was, it already had entity framework, it already had a database and tables and a bunch of views and a bunch of controllers, and we added in identity into it. And so to kind of glance at the database side, now inside of our bookstore we have these tables that we got from ASP.NET Identity. And there's a lot of tables, but you can kind of see the users tables, and at the end of this we had not only registering new users on your website, of course that's something we're all familiar with, but then of course logging users back in. So that's basically where we're at, is we have users, we can register users, we can log users in, we can log users out, and that's where we left it. And so we see two users in our database, and we should be able to kind of boot this chapter 13 up. Yeah, I'll get this going on streaming, and just kind of demonstrate where we left off. Of course, there's a login button, and Joe Mama with the super secure A, capital A. We don't really have that remember me doing anything at this point, but obviously we're logged in. You can see we're logged in as Joe Mama, and we're able to log then back out. And if we don't log in properly, we get some validation, and that's where it is. Ryan maybe asked me, hey, and I wanted to answer this because I got to thinking about it, and it's like, hey, now that we have these new tables, like how would I bring this into our case study, right? Because our case study kind of has users already, and you would have to update the database schema to have basically this as your users table, right? So you would no longer associate whatever table you had for users before. You have a new users table essentially. And what we didn't really do, and I can kind of here's this class of user inherit from identity user, but just as we learned before, if you want to relate that class to something else, like a user can have a list of courses, and a course can have a list of users, and there you go. There's your many-to-many relationship. So what we didn't do yesterday, but we will do today, is this kind of thing where we're modifying the user table to have additional fields, right? So just kind of one thing that we're going to do today is modifying our user to have some additional rows and columns of data. And that's kind of a question that I know was asked yesterday that I thought, that's a really good question. What might that look like in a model, right? So, of course, pulled up the little ChatGPT and tweaked it to get that back, but that's neither here nor there. You guys know what that looks like. What else are we doing today? Well, we haven't done anything with roles. And so roles are just another name for groups, right? You add members to groups, and then you can assign permissions to groups. One thing I can tell you from even way back when I was in industry a long time ago, you always added users to groups. You never just had like a standalone user with permissions. You always, even if it was a single user, you put that single user in some sort of group, so that when that second user comes along, you just put that second user into a group, right? So you never should assign individual permissions to a user by user basis. Even if it's a user with their own unique permissions, you make a group for them, and then when that next user that has that need comes along, you put them in a group that already exists. So we're going to start dealing with roles and locking down different pages based on roles. And here we do have like an admin. I believe this is an admin area, right? So remember, we were dealing with areas earlier on in the semester, and so we have an admin area where we can manage authors and books and genres, and probably start locking this stuff down, right? Not just creating an area where you can do this stuff, which we have currently implemented, but start locking that down with permissions based on the roles. Which, look, once you can create the users, once you can create the roles, turns out locking things down is pretty doggone simple with those attributes. So in the in the book, we're on page 768, and just like we had a user manager class, and with that user manager, of course, we created users and you could delete users. There's a role manager class which can be used to do the same thing: create roles, update roles, and delete roles. And just like yesterday, these are built-in async methods, and so we'll be writing async methods to work with them, right? Since these are asynchronous database calls, we have to write our action methods that return an asynchronous task. I think it's like task T or whatever it is. And so you can look up roles, you can create roles, and update roles and delete roles. And you just give a role a name. You can have a group. Again, it's just a group name. So you can admin, power users. Think of Discord, right? Discord has a bunch of roles. You can create roles on Discord, right? We have, I think, a role for your class, and it's the 2023 graduating class, whatever it was. So you just create a group, aka create a role. And from the user manager, well, then you can call on add to a role, right? So you create the user, create the role, and then you add the user to the role. So it's actually not too hard. Then the question becomes, at least in my mind, I would think you basically seed your roles, right? So you're going to want to create the roles with some sort of seed data, which is something that the book will cover, right? How to seed roles like admin and power users and whatever roles you might want. Or you provide an interface to create roles. So you basically create a role manager page or whatever you want to call it to create new roles and delete roles, add users to roles. And so those are kind of two options, right? It's just creating a web page to create roles and manage roles, or seeding those roles and adding users to roles. We will do both approaches. So, there's no one right answer. You could kind of go with either one. Like in my mind, it makes sense to seed the roles because you just, here's my admin role, here's my user role, and just seed that into your program. But we'll do both. We'll create a web page that does it, and I still haven't shared. Get with it, teacher. We are live. So this is a page kind of looking forward that you can use to manage roles, basically delete roles, or add users to roles. And depending on your app, you've all done this before, even if it's just on, for example, Discord, right? You probably have messed with this kind of stuff before. And I know we did it in the JavaScript class. And so, the first kind of theory is there. We've got a role manager and we've got a user manager, and we're going to use the methods and properties of these classes to create users, create roles, add users to roles, create a web page to, add users to the roles, manage users, if you will, how to seed roles. I mean, that's pretty much the gist of it. And so really the code will begin that we're going to kind of start right here is working with the user entity. And so we created this user entity yesterday. And so in the models, we kind of close it all down. And our domain models, we now have a user class which inherits from identity user. We kind of start by adding this property. So again, not something we did yesterday, but it's like, hey, adding new properties to the user class. Now, not mapped. Okay, this is an attribute that just says don't add this to a database column. Right, so this property isn't going to be mapped to a database column, and this is going to be a list of strings, not a list of string called role names. So each user will have a list that you could basically loop through the list and spit out the roles that a user is a member of. And that's all there is to it. Pretty simple place to start. Now, if you look at that slide right here, you can see that we have both a list of users and a list of roles. So you might be thinking, there's not one place in the database you could pull that from, so maybe a view model, and that's the next step. Right? Is if this is what we're creating, all this database doesn't exist as one type. Like there's not a user and role type. So that's the point of a view model. The point of a view model is to bring in the data out of the database for a view. And so that's what we're going to create next, which is a user view model. And so here we go, view models. And let's add a class. User view model. And basically we have a list of users and a list of roles. IEnumerable is an interface that says, hey, just something that you can loop over. I got confused the other day, IEnumerable versus an enum. You guys remember enums? IEnumerable is something you can loop over. So we have an IEnumerable, like a list, for example, of user. Users. And something that you can loop over of roles. Identity role. Now we need an import statement for this. When I say import, I'm referring to Java. C# uses a using statement. Microsoft.ASP core identity. When you bring that in, then you have an identity role. And this is our view model for that page to ultimately display users and the roles that they have. So the user manager page. And again, my brain starts with, just seed the roles, but just not going to do that. That's okay. We will do that eventually. Moving on, the next spot is in the admin area. to add a user controller. And so right now in the admin area, so here's area, here's admin, here's our controllers there. Let's go ahead and add a controller. This is going to be the user controller. And to kind of lock it down, ultimately you're gonna have this. You're gonna have a couple of using statements. Let's bring in our using statements. Using Microsoft Core authorization. So that's going to be so that we can add the authorization attributes. And we're going to bring in identity and our models. Domain models. And so ultimately we're going to write this code. Now we're going to leave it commented out because right now we don't have any admin roles, right? But ultimately you do want to lock this down. So this is something that I'm going to comment out for now, okay? And we'll come back to that when we have admins so that only admins can get to this space. Let's add in the area of admin. Bring in a user manager to manage users. Called role manager, and our constructors reminds me of the code that we wrote yesterday a little bit. In the constructor, we bring in all that. IntelliSense is ever more impressive. User manager, role manager, and we are off. Now the index method, we're going to return it's an async method now. We're going to return a task, iActionResult. And again, because these methods are asynchronous methods, we have to write asynchronous methods. And so we're declaring an asynchronous method here. It's returning this task. That's an asynchronous task. And so here we go. So this is the index method of, basically the page is loading. This is a get request. And what are we going to do? We're going to get a list of users. Okay, so create an empty list, if you will. Okay, so we essentially pass in our user manager full of users. We loop through our users. And do a read user.role names. spin up, so empty list of users, loop through all your users. Did I say loop through all your losers?
Yeah.
Loop through all your losers. For each user, they have a role names property. Where did that come from? Well, we just created that, right? We're adding. We're basically, this is a list of string on the left. This is a list of string on the right. Yes.
Okay, so the role names again.
Yeah. So on the left-hand side, you have a list of string. On the right-hand side, you have a list of string. So data types match. So for that user, you basically populate that user's role names property. We just created that. And then we add that user to our list of user. It's basically this with the new property for each one of our users, right? Because our users don't have that property until we add it. Then we spin up a view model. User view model. New user view model. Okay, using this object initializer syntax. Users equals users. And pulling on the available roles out of the role manager, no semicolon. Right there, belongs right there. And then send the model up into the view model. Okay, now we have a nice little view that we need to code up, right? So this view, again, just kind of looking at the end result here, has a couple different tables, a couple different headings, add a user link, manage user, button, so on and so forth. So that's where we're headed, is the view. We good on this one? You guys need a few minutes? Good. Right, so rolling on, we're under views, and let's create a new folder, add a folder called user, and add a view called index. See if you're not going to like our. So our type isn't recognized here. Let's go to the view imports and add a using bookstore models, domain models.
Yeah, the view models.
Did I do the wrong one? Using bookstore, yeah, that's right, it's under view models. Thank you. Now, since it's a view model, we need to have the view model folder. Yep. Okay. I'm not going to have a navbar link to get there. But if I were to go to user, we can get there. Right, so we're in the admin/user. We get to that. We get to that manage users view that we're now coding up. It says manage users, and it looks like there's a sub navbar that would be in this manager view where we can add in. If I let's go to shared admin layout. Here we go. Maybe we're gonna copy and paste this. Nav item index controller would be user, users, and just add that nav item into our admin layout under the shared folder. Okay, admin manage users. Hey, now we have a link. Close the admin layout, close the view imports. We have quite a bit more to do on the controller side, and you're going to see some of that pretty quickly. Like, here's that link that says add a user.
Sorry,
Which,
I have a question.
yeah.
For you. Can you just show that nav item you just made?
Yeah,
Double check something.
you got it.
So okay, so user. Okay, I got
Yeah, I
it.
think I changed 1, 2, 3
Yep.
words.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is the add method on the user controller. And so like yesterday when we registered a user, we're just going to write the same logic to add a user here. So we get to do that twice, so that's cool. So we'll come back obviously on the controller side and do that. Table SM, small table. Okay, so our columns are username, roles, and we got some empty THs. How many empty? 1, 2, 3. And all these THs need to be in a TR, so don't forget your row tag. And then inside of the row you have TH. And there's 5 columns total, so copy and paste 3 empty TDs. Kind of glancing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns for this first table. And this is the heading that we're creating on our table. So we already created this heading and the link. Now we're creating this table. After the T head, we have a T body. a little if. Just had flashbacks to JavaScript world with triple equals. Count is the method. Remember that a call span is a table cell that goes across 5 columns. Right? There's call span and row span attributes, right? Let's go back to our HTML days. Row span spans 5 rows, call span spans 5 columns. Okay. It's in the name. There are no user counts. And the TD and the TR, else for each user in your model, make a row for the user. Got a little nested loop here for each role name and user.role name. That's your list of strings. Print out the role name in a div. Right, the div's just going to cause a line break for you. But we're only going to have one role starting out, which is the admin role. So okay. This was a typo. This needs to be a TD and the TD. So if you're following along and you're as quick as I am, you might notice TR, this TR then needs to encompass all of that. Okay. Semantic HTML. Nesting properly. There we go. Okay, so we put the user's name and then we put their roles in the next cell. And then, again, just kind of going back to the mock-up, we've got 3 cells of buttons. And the book notes that with the simple if statement, you could say, hey, if they are an admin, don't show the add to admin button. So let's kind of wire up that. We could put that little functionality in. In the next TD, is a button that posts to a delete. So this is a delete user, to a delete method. You pass in the user ID. Say button danger, delete user. Okay, so I think we can copy that whole column, that whole TD, and just make a few changes. So here we'll say if the users, if user dot role names contains admin, you throw a not out front. So if the user doesn't have admin, then you show this button. And let's actually move that inside the TD. So we basically don't show them the form. Or we only show them the button if the role name doesn't exist on that user. We keep the cell there as an empty cell otherwise. And finally, I'm going to copy and paste again my last column. Oh, wait a minute. I got copy and paste almost got me. The action on this one is add to admin. We pass along the user ID as well. And then the text will say add. Add to admin. So add the user to admin. And finally, we're going to remove from admin. So the action is remove from admin, pass along the user ID, remove from admin.
I have a question.
And let's make these button primary. Yes, sir.
So like, if you, I noticed you're using like a conditional statement for like that admin right there on line 44.
Yeah.
Is that possible to like add that throughout your app to like add in buttons for places like if the user is an admin, then show the button, otherwise don't show the button or something like that? I think that'd be like a pretty cool way to do
Even
that.
in the nav bar kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean the nav bar, I mean that.
Well, you
I
could,
feel like there's like different areas, and then there's like you can put it in your main app to like check if the user is an admin as well.
yeah, you could use that. That is correct. Now let's, I mean, right now, we're not going to see this table at all because we don't have any users. We should see this. There are no user accounts. So if I spin that up, a lot of that markup's not what I would expect. Admin, manage users. Wait a minute. I do have users. Duh. I have Joe and Joe Mama. Obviously none of that's factored in and we have no roles. So dare I forget my two users that do exist. Just out of pure say, okay, authorize. Admin. Bingo. Redirected us to account login. So that you have to be logged in now. And if I log in as Joe, log in as Joe, it redirects me back to the page I wanted in the first place. Awesome.
So I'm sorry, what did you have to try to do for that? You were logged
I
in
went to
and-
admin and I went to manage users. I wasn't logged in, but I didn't have permissions. So I logged in and it just redirected me to the page I was trying to get to.
But I thought we didn't add permissions.
I just
see.
tacked that on just to tinker with it.
I missed that.
So how does it now bring you back to that
Well, if you, I think in your answer, you can kind of see this return URL. Admin user, you can kind of read that between the lines, that query string. That's the answer. The return URL.
You log in, your username, stay in that bar.
So there's that. Is yours not staying there? So that was something we did yesterday. That was out here on the view layout, and we wrote right here. All right.
I must have missed something.
Okay. We can come back to it. Okay. All right. So that's pretty cool. And then we go back to the here, and that's the end of our TD. That's the end of our T row. That curly closes the for each, and that curly closes the else. And then we close our table body, and then we close our table. So what's next? Again, back to the mock-up. We got manage roles. And it's like, hey, if there are no roles, there's a button to create a role. Otherwise, show the table of roles. Kind of like the same thing we did here, right? There's going to be a big outer if else and some logic inside. I missed the triple equals. So this action is gonna do what it sounds like it's gonna do. It's actually gonna create the role using some of those methods that we discussed at the beginning. Oh, how about button info? Just to have fun, we're going to create admin role. Otherwise, loop through the roles, put them in a table. Put them in a small table. So it's two columns, a role and then a button. For each. Each role has a name property and a button. Okay, a button to delete the role, close the cell, close the role, the row, close the body, close the table, close the else block. Save it up. Admin, manage users. We don't have create admin role. That method has not been created yet, but we got our button there and all is good with the world. Okay, so lots of functionality to code in this user controller, and we could start in different places, but I think the place that makes the most sense in my mind is with the create admin role, because I want to create a role. HTTP post and so it's a pretty simple method call. It's an asynchronous method, so we have to await. Role manager create and so we're just going to hard code the admin and redirect. Okay, let's create the admin role. Obviously, I mentioned this earlier that you might just seed the admin role, right? Instead of going through this, but nonetheless, create admin role. And now you could see there is an admin role of admin, and we don't have delete role working yet, but it did create the role of admin. Now, to double check that, we can go into the roles and, oh, no, we don't have any user roles, right? This is the join table. We don't have any user roles, but however, we should have, here's our roles table. And there you see the encrypted ID, the admin, and the concurrency stamp. Remember, concurrency is that problem where two people are trying to edit the same row at the same time. Last in wins, first in wins, that kind of thing.
I'm sorry, I missed what you did up to this point to get that. Did you have to run another update?
All I did was I created the admin role, which is wired up to a button.
At the very bottom of your button, and it's still.
Yeah, yep. Just click the button, and then
It's
I looked
like
at
a one-use button, right? Like
one-use
it's-
button.
Yeah.
It's not a very useful button, but nonetheless, there's the button. So there's another button to delete the role, so maybe we do that next. Maybe we delete the role. So under the create admin role, let's post, and we can go back and forth and create it and delete it all we want. think I took a wrong note. This looks like a delete user.
Yeah, because there's a delete role. That's
Yeah, we have a delete user. I just took a bad note in my book. The first method is delete, and then there's a delete role. That's what I need. Delete role. I just took a bad note because that said delete. Okay. Anyways, you can't see my notes, so that doesn't mean anything to you. Public async task action result delete role. So look up the role by its ID. Use the role manager to delete async, pass it the role, and redirect to index.
More useful if you could like type in a role name and then it'll add different roles and stuff.
Database is going mad. Let's create the admin. Okay, what would be next? Add to admin, remove from admin. So let's wire up add to admin next. Then we'll do remove from admin. Sure. Okay, so look the roll up. If you don't find it, a little error message, temp data message. Okay. Oh, wait a second. We're not passing in the ID. The ID that we're passing in there is the user ID. So you need to pass in the string value of admin. And here on the user manager, we find by ID async ID. Here's that method that I point out, add to role async. Which essentially says add this user to the admin role dot name, aka admin. load the page. Yeah, let's check it on my end. See if I coded this properly. Admin.
Oh, find by name. 'Cause that's there it is.
Okay, I wouldn't expect that. Let me see what my problem is. Yeah, that's what it is. So the role manager dot find by name async. Thought I was doing a find by ID. I was not. There we go. So Joe Mama is an admin, and going into our ASP.NET user roles, you can see our user ID and our role ID. Joe Mama, admin. Nice and encrypted. All right, as makes sense, let's do remove from admin. So HTTP post. So look the user up by their string ID. Remove from role async. User admin. Again, I think you guys were discussing this of like, okay, we could take this and here's how we could make it better, like by implementing more roles and maybe getting input from the user. What role do you want to create? What role do you want to remove? These are all things I think that are within your task abilities. Once we kind of get the thing started, you could take it from there. If you wanted multiple roles and now that he is an admin, we can remove from admin, get the button back. And there we go. So we have add to admin, remove from admin, we have adding a role, we have deleting a role. Adding a user would be the next kind of thing, and we did that yesterday, so let's bring in adding a user. So there's an add method that's a post. Just give them a link to the register.
Or like, if you click the add and it just like redirects you.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you want to create one for someone else, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I think you guys are saying maybe the same thing, maybe not, but so comment this out. you know, we got the register page that we coded yesterday. And so when we click add a new user, basically take them to this page to add someone else's, add an account for someone.
Fair enough.
Or you copy and paste the logic, and that's what I'm going to do.
That first 1 second show your encrypted password?
I think there was a little eyeball button that if I click on register,
It's like it auto-populated, but it's like for a split second it was there. That seems like a bug. You know?
yeah, well, a lot of times there's a little eyeball that said, you know, you want to see the password that it generated for you. Anywho,
You gotta change your password now, that's on your end.
you know, you're right. I mean, this would be like an add view that we would have to create, you know, the thing. We would need an add. So I do just kind of like redirecting it. I believe it was the user controller register method, and it was back, no, the account controller, and because it's in a different, see, now it's saying admin user add. Of course there is no admin user add, so I need it in a different area. So just kind of curious if I do that, that will break everything. Or not. Never guess at coding, you know? It's like, hey, I think that's gonna work. No, it doesn't work. Isn't that funny?
Well, I think it would be a get, wouldn't it?
It would be a get.
Still doesn't work, but
Still didn't work, yeah. Let me look at these different things real quick. There's always different ways to redirect. Yeah, so just a little classroom discussion. Ryan says, hey, can't you just reuse the code that you already had? And I said, that's a good idea. And then we started kind of trying to mold the two and building an add method. And Josh said, wait a minute, can't we just build the link how we normally build the link using these tag helpers? And there's your solution, right? So just reusing the anchor tag and the tag helpers of register, account controller and emptying out the ASP area. Beautiful. And so what do we have left to do? Delete a user. So this is in the user controller. So this is the delete method of a user. So we look the user up. Find by ID async. So if result did not succeed, there's a succeeded. If the result was not successful, build out an error message on a string. Each error. Just separate all your errors out with pipe symbols and spaces. And then throw that into temp data. Bless you. And then reload. So if you get an error, put the message into temp data and go home. Otherwise, you delete the user and then they'll be off your home page. I'll just add so I'll just make myself logged in, see myself, delete user, I go away. Okay. That's the end of that page. We wired up all the buttons. Something that we talked about early on that you can do now is using these different roles. You can apply authorization to different areas, different controllers. And so for example, there's a controller here called the cart controller, and to add in authorization access, we'll say using authorization. And we'll say, hey, to get access to the cart controller, you must be logged in. So authorized. then going to all the controllers of the admin area. And so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. You can add in copy, Control C, Control V. Control V. Bring that in.
So for all the controllers you use.
Yeah, for all of the controllers in the admin area, we have to be logged in with role of admin. So let's test that. And I'll just make a user. Were any of my users admin? Was Joe Mama admin? Hopefully Joe Mama was. So Joe Mama is in fact an admin. You can see I'm logged in as Joe admin, so I can get to these different manage controllers. But my other Joe Mama with another M is not admin. So if I log out and log back in is the other user. You don't even give them the nav bar at this point that says admin, but here you could see access denied. Now this is not the most user-friendly way of seeing access denied. In fact, you would be quite confused. So let's go to the account controller and back to the account controller and give them a different message. Account controller back here. And this is how we're going to wire this up. Public view result access denied. And then you're going to have to make an account in the account view. We're going to add a view here called access denied CSHTML. Access denied. And you could redirect them to whatever page you want to if you don't want them access denied, but log in, let's log in with here, here. Now we just give them whatever message you want. Okay, after a little trial and error, here's what we just added, just a simple little thing. So on our view, added, and this could be, I did nested ifs, but probably would just be a single if with an and. If the user is signed in and they're a role of admin, then you show the admin link, and that way you don't have to say access denied. If they don't see the link, they're probably not going to know the URL to type it manually. However, if they do know the URL and type it manually, they get an access denied. But we log in as with a single M, And because this user is in fact an admin, we can gain access to all these, and we can see the link. However, if we log in as the other account that is not an admin, we don't see the link in the nav bar.
I see your other statements again.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm pretty sure you just make it an and. Yeah.
I think I just missed where you got it from, but where does that user come from again?
It's stuff in the top, right?
Yeah, so user
Oh, it's from sign in.
valid question. Yeah, so the question is a good question, and I as we coded this, I didn't pay much attention, but this is something that's built in, this user, and you can kind of see the full path, you know, as far as Microsoft, ASP.NET Core, MVC, Razor page base.user, and it says gets the claims principal of the current logged in user. So that's something that's built into Razor pages, is this user property.
So then that user and the model that we have user, they're different things.
Yeah, I mean the model user can represent any user. This represents the user you're logged in as. But that's cool because I think, like, you know, who wouldn't want that? If user is in role, throw in the role, show them the right links.
And you can use that throughout your application, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's built into Razor, so yeah, any view. Yeah.
So that kind of begs the question, with if you have like a view model that has a user in it, you call it user, and you try to do like something with user in the view model in a view, is that going to conflict with that user?
Typically, you want to name, instead of the capital user property, name it lowercase user or what have you, so you avoid those kinds of conflicts.
Or it would just be user instead of model that user, probably.
Probably different, yeah, if you have different namespaces, then that can avoid conflicts as well. They're coming from different places. You can have a user class inside of one namespace, it's not going to conflict with a user class inside another namespace. Unless you're trying to work with them at the same time, then it's like, which one's which? I think I'm going to stop today. I'll finish this up. Literally, there's like 2 or 3 more things. So there's really not a ton left, but it's a good stopping point for today.